Thank you for joining us this Saturday morning. Now, the public launch of the Nigeria Energy Transition Plan in August is expected to showcase the country's pathway to achieving net zero emissions by 2060, like we said in our intro, and her leadership role in enabling a just and equitable climate future for Africa, with the ultimate objective of mobilizing the finance required to jumpstart implementation of the plan. Oh, that is sounding like Greek, right? Never mind. Relax, relax. We'll break it down very, very shortly. The Vice President highlighted the significant scale of resources required to attain both development and climate ambitions, saying Nigeria would need to spend $410 billion above business as usual spending to deliver its transition plan by 2060, which translates to about $10 billion per year in a Nigeria which happens to be broke. Right. So, we have a lot to talk about in this regard this morning, and it is my pleasure to welcome two gentlemen to help us cut through all this grammar, as they say. Mr. Charles Iyore joins us from Kent via Zoom, and he's the principal partner, Dion and Associates. Good morning, Mr. Iyore.
Good morning, Alero. Good morning.
We also have Mr. Joe Nwakwe, who is oil and gas consultant. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Now, before Ayo takes over, quickly, I was laughing when I said zero emissions by 2060.
No, net zero.
Net, yes. Is that kind of ambitious? Mr. Iyore?
Well, I always say that we are a society, and we must watch any of the things we do in that perspective. There's a global figure about what they see as net zero. That does not necessarily need to guide what we're doing immediately, because ultimately the interest of our community is what's important. I doubt very much that we will achieve those figures that the world wants to achieve in that period. But for us to achieve those things, the three things that are critical, and that is what is now becoming almost a cliche: meritocracy. You need to be pragmatic whatever you're doing. And when you do those things, honesty becomes part of it. And I think that's what you do at Channels, which is why you're successful as a community. It may not be 100% or but a good percentage. Now, when that is absent in a society, no matter what you do, I doubt if you can get those outcomes. So the parts of the world that have taken those things on board, meritocracy, pragmatism, and honesty, will achieve those net zero objectives. But if you're not used to doing those things, it is difficult for you to achieve them. So it's achievable, but I don't think we must allow the world drive us. Let's determine what we want to do for our people, for our own people in the best interest.
That's quite interesting.
Mr. Nwakwe, what's your first take on that?
Well, I think I agree with my colleague here. It's achievable. There are things you need to do, however, to get there. If you look at our past record, then it doesn't tell a very good story of how we've handled critical national assignments like this. So, yes, the numbers are staggering, if you will, but I think it's achievable if only we focused and did the right things. And doing the right things includes getting competent people to drive it. We are not short on policies, but we are very short on implementation of policies.
From your own experience, what would be the inhibitions? It's, as my partner said, it's a laudable, project, and it's not something that is new, really, because we're not hearing about this whole climate issues for the first time. From very many years back, we've known that deforestation is harming us more than it's doing any help to us. And not just in the rural areas, in the urban areas, in the rural areas even more so. So from a government perspective, what would you say the issues are that may be unknown to many? What are the inhibitions?
I guess you want me to take a stab on that.
Yes.
I will start by saying that the key issues that we have is energy access. Energy poverty is become a second nature to us here, and you cannot divorce or you cannot absorb government of responsibility in that. Uh, it is mind-boggling that many years after we are unable to provide electricity to our people. So to that extent, uh, you start to wonder if a government cannot deliver just electricity to its people, then how far can it go in ensuring that the energy mix is clean? Because transition is about decarbonizing right now. That's the primary focus. And but you cannot decarbonize energy that you didn't supply, right? So essentially, what we need to do is to ensure that we provide energy for the larger proportion of our population, who today are dependent on wood and biofuels. We need to be able to, which has very negative effect on their health, the environment. So we need to move away. We need to provide accessible, affordable energy to our people. So the third consideration, which is making it sustainable, which is the environmental side, in my view, should not drive our policy, at least in the near term. What should drive our policy in the near term is ensuring that we have sufficient enough energy to drive growth. And in doing that, once you get going, then you can clean up the energy mix with time. And I hope that's what the plan intends to achieve. And government has a very, very central role in ensuring that we deliver energy to our people, and that energy, in the first instance, has to be affordable and available. So wherever our people are, they need to have energy. And once you ensure access, and then we can now clean up that mix gradually. Today, indeed, Nigeria, there about 70–80% of our electricity is what you might consider clean. We are very heavy on thermal generation, right? The other one is the dams, hydro. So in a sense, we don't have any coal plants that is functional. So you would think that that should not be our primary focus today. We're not putting in so much carbon into the atmosphere in providing energy. However, we need our people to have access. It is very key. So I haven't looked at the plan in any detail, but I hope that our focus is in ensuring that we have available energy and that is affordable in the first instance. Then we can clean it up and make it sustainable in the long term.
Perhaps one of the issues to look at now in this whole conversation, I want to go to Mr. Iyore now, is the buying of the people to start with. Now, part of the plan, the Nigeria's energy transition plan, a homegrown, data-backed, multi-pronged strategy developed for the achievement of net zero emission in terms of the nation's energy consumption. Now, the plan, from what we know, sets out a timeline and framework for the reduction of emissions across 5 sectors: power, cooking, oil and gas, transport, and industry. There's a lot to unpack in just that, but let me begin here. Mr. Nwakwe talked about the fact that this thing, it's the execution that's always the issue. And at the core of execution of these things is always people, both the people to execute and the people that are going to facilitate it in the urban Nigeria, suburban Nigeria, rural Nigeria, and all of that. Perhaps a good place to begin with would be in the buying of the people. For a long time, we've heard that people should not cut trees down anymore. People should discourage deforestation, plant a tree a day, and all those things. But that's as far as it goes. It would seem like we start the process, we start the campaign, the conversation, and along the line, we just kind of step it down. We don't do much about it. In what way or ways do you think carrying people along in these various sectors, power, cooking, oil and gas, transport and industry, how do we begin the process of carrying the people along, getting the buy-in of the people so the plan is not frustrated?
Oh, Ayo, is that for me? Thank you very much,
yes.
Ayo. All right, that's okay. Like I said before, I just told you about what it takes to have meritocracy, pragmatism, and honesty for us as a matter of course. Another one I'll also tell you is that you won't be talking to me today if you just went and said, oh, collect your paper, I have a degree. Because that would be an assumption of a degree. The only way you can get that degree is to work for it. It's called derivation. You derive to get a degree. Now, a country is also just like a human being. And when you have decided not to earn a degree, you can't just wake up and say you have a degree. So all I will do from the perspective of government is to give you slowly, systematic terms, how we have rolled back our capacity to compete. Okay? I'll keep that only within the military rule. The first thing that the military did was to say they needed a unitary government, which would just dissolve all the capacities of all the regions. We are still fighting the war of unity government to tomorrow. The second one they did was that you awarded with dodgy money, which was not linked to productivity. And inflation just went through the roof, has never been corrected, and the appetite for imported things increased. And then the third thing they did was that they destroyed the civil service. All the cadres of the civil service disappeared, followed by the decision to systematically destroy public speech. They destroyed the student unions, they destroyed the labor unions, they destroyed the bar associations, they destroyed the medical, so the conscience totally disappeared. And after that, we came back with a high-haul activity called War Against the Discipline. Nobody knows what that meant. Beyond that, we started to sell the currency, which is the naira, against the reserves of dollars you earned, without understanding the concept of money. And the currency has been in decline for 30 years. Then beyond that, you came to a situation where you said, no. You want in the, what do you call it, democracy. They give you democracy. They just happen like that. Now, those are some of the things you need to systematically roll back. Because when you talk about meritocracy, pragmatism, and honesty, it comes to the fact that if you choose to work only for your own community, it's as stupid as saying that all the workers in Nigeria's position must be men, or women, or children, or animals, or whatever. So when you don't allow meritocracy and pragmatism and honesty to come to play, it's like you're having a bath with dirty water. And that's your water that you have, by the way, is called the liquidity of the economy, which is the currency. You can't manage your currency. Leadership is everywhere, in every village, in every town, in every state, and at the center. You have demonstrated it in channels, what leadership means. So let the country copy from you. Thank you.
But that's still, well, that still, in a way, does not quite answer how we get the buy-in of the people on this plan. If,
yes.
as the Vice President has posited, if we're to achieve net zero by 2060, 2060 is like, it's less than 40 years from now.
Okay. Now, the only way you can buy the people, get the people buying, you see, they are part of the process. If they're not part of the process, there's no way they're going to buy it. Now, you can create the best roads, the best houses, the best schools, and the best everything in the country. If people do not have the money to buy that thing, it's called consumer spending, you are not going to achieve any growth. So you must deal with the fact that how come you're not able to provide spending in the country? How come 90% of Nigerians have a take-home pay that doesn't get them home? How come a professor or a doctor or a lawyer struggles to buy a car. When I was young, the EO, which was the first level of the cadre of executives in civil service, who sent his child to Oxford. Those are the issues. And I've been saying for a long while that if we don't approach this conversation from an intellectual basis, we aren't going to achieve anything. I can't keep saying, Dogo Turenchi, the English you could speak. You see, there's not in Nigeria, we're not in a bubble, we're in the world. And when you refuse to do those things, you can't get anywhere. Unfortunately, all of Africa is looking to us. So, Mr. Ayo, the only way to do that thing is to get people involved. Now, I'll give you an example of what I mean. You see, when you talk about tourism, people come into your country and your people are not involved in that tourism. They begin to see you and everything they see as spectacle. You're just something, they're going to the zoo. In countries where they have involved their own people, where people have money to spend, tourism has grown. That's what you have in Dubai. You can't start a business without a Dubai person being part of it. In countries like Egypt, where that's not the case, in Tanzania, where that's not the case, or in Tunisia, where it's held in only a few hands, you can't get the kind of growth that you want. So those are the issues, getting people involved, making sure that everybody is part of the process. That's the way to achieve those processes. Because just spending money and borrowing money and creating assets that people can access is a hiding to nothing. I hope I've answered the question.
Well, reasonably.
We'll have to take it.
Well, we'll live with that one.
Mr.
You can ask anything you want, delicately.
You know, it's with the conversation is just starting, right? But you are spot on when you talked about, you know, when you gave the analogy of tourism and all of that, and it's all over the place, you know. So if we have this kind of initiative and government is unable to carry people along, then it would seem like it's just a top to bottom, and not a bottom to top approach. So if we are going to approach it any differently from how we have approached issues over time, how do we go about it? That's the question. Let me see if I can put that question to Mr. Nwakwe. How do we achieve that buy-in of the people? Government, the vice president, you know, is in the US now, you know, trying to, you know, garner some support from the world on Nigeria's energy transition plan. How do we get the buy-in of the people so it's a sustainably successful plan? Okay,
my brother had just given you a macro view of what needs to be done, right? And I understand your question. What we need to do, remember that cleaner energy will come a bit pricey relative to what we have today. That's on, if you think about it, if you take a unit of energy anywhere in the world that is dirty and you clean it up, so it will be more expensive. And that's where the issue he raised about our lack of a productive economy. Really, people are not earning enough to even afford the dirty energy, if you will. And so the question is, how do you sell this idea of a more expensive, cleaner energy to them? So that's the perspective I'll come from. So if you look at it, there has to be a rejig of the entire system. People need to be able to afford it. Like I said earlier, there are three key considerations for me. One is that energy has to be available. It makes no sense. You can't get a buy-in from somebody who is in darkness, right? For instance, if you're not connected to the grid, or the grid barely serves you maybe 4 hours a day, and somebody comes to you and say, well, I need your buy-in, you know, you're going to be looking at him like, what? So you listed all the critical 5 sectors that were identified, and I'll take them one after the other. If you think of power, like I said, the bulk of our generation today is gas-fired. So there's some work to be done there to clean that up. Hydro, there's very little work to do in that sense. Cooking is critical. The bulk of our people are using biofuels, right? That is the one we need to work very hard on. How do we get, for instance, LPG to people? So how do we get people to buy into LPG? If you follow the trend in the last year or so, a 12.5 kg bottle of LPG has gone from 4 to 5,000 to 10,000, right? So Ayo, how do you get your mom in the village to buy it? How does that happen? How do you get somebody to buy a 12.5 kg bottle of LPG at 10,000 when they can get an equivalent bundle of wood at 1,000, right? So that is the buy-in challenge. How do we get that to happen? We talked about transportation. You know where we are with fuel, and we need to clean up. If you're going to clean up, a lot of diesel-fired vehicles are on the road, and that's a pollutant if you think about it. So how do we get people to switch to gas, auto gas, right? Natural gas vehicles. Those are practical things that has to happen. But the question is, there's a capital cost to conversion, right? What is the policy of government in either incentivizing that? Because that's the only way you can get buy-in. If you walk up to me and say, I want you to convert your diesel-fired truck to auto gas and conversion kit, maybe $5,000 or something like that, and somebody comes and says, that's how much I'm going to have to outlay to convert, I'm going to be asking, well, can I manage to drive with diesel? I don't want to spend so much. I don't have $5,000 to invest. So those are the issues. I hope and I would like to believe that the government is looking at each and every one of these pieces to see how do we make it easy on people to get on board. It's all about economics at the end of the day. No one will go and invest on a fuel that when he runs the numbers, it doesn't make economic sense to him, especially now that things are very difficult. So we're having a conversation at a very difficult time. How do we get people to leave the diesel generators that power most households in Nigeria, right? That's a major pollutant right there. So that means you need to give them grid power. So how do you get grid power? I mean, that's the buy-in. If you tell me that there's power, I'm not going to put diesel now. It makes no sense to put diesel. But if the grid power is not there, there's nothing you do to get my buy-in. I'm going to fire that generator because I need light at home, or my factory needs light. I need to produce. So when we talk of buy-in, those are the issues. There's a cost to it. How do we fund it? And there's the issue of availability. How do we make sure that people have alternative clean energy? If they don't, they will continue to use firewood. If gas remains at 10,000 naira per 12.5 kg bottle, I guarantee you the average woman in the village will not touch it. So they will continue to get firewood. Yeah. So that is the challenge with buying. How do we get this to them? How do we make sure that there's good enough LPG penetration to all of those people so that they can have, and it will be affordable for them to use to cook. Once they start doing that, they will cut less of the woods for cooking. So we have to go through each subsector of this to really understand what the critical enablers are to buying. But generally speaking, I think it's availability, affordability, and then of course we talk about sustainability in the long run.
Mr. Ayore, it seems that all these things that Mr. Wakwe has analyzed all boils down to availability and affordability. The issue of power supply, people have got to be connected to the grid, cooking with gas, they have to have the money to be able to buy the gas, which price, of course, has doubled in the last year or so. And then the conversion of cars. All these things have a cost attached to them. So what you mentioned earlier about people having money in their pockets then seems to be a major issue in this discussion. Therefore, it all seems to fall back to the lap of government, because it is government that will provide this power we're talking about, connect everybody to the grid. It is government that will provide the gas so that it is available for us to buy affordably. So the question now, Mr. Ayore, is how is government going to approach this matter of getting more money into the pockets of its citizens?
Thank you very much, Lero, and I think you and Ayo are doing such a wonderful job. I wish you were in government. Now, what I have said, and I will come to that basically. There is no country better positioned than Nigeria to achieve net energy zero in less than 10 years. What we have, the rest of the world doesn't have. We have dams, we have oil, which can be clean, we have gas, we have solar panel not even tapped into. But when they put out an energy policy, what they seem to be looking at is that all Nigeria is lit up everywhere, and we're able to watch, is it black magic, you call it on television? That's not the essence of power. You need to be certain that the structure of production is in place. And some of those structures may even be beyond the country. I'll explain something to you. A long while ago, all of West Africa used to come and buy its textiles in Nigeria. So economics is not bound by the country. But you see, for as long as you have people who have betrayed the trust placed in them from top to bottom, most probably including me, you're going to hide into nothing. So let me tell you the advantage that we have. Maybe that's a better way to look at it. One, we have a fantastic market, the whole of West Africa. No matter the amount of power we produce, people will be able to take it. Therefore, the shift is to say, look, that power that we send to West Africa and the whole of the region, what can it produce? If all we want to produce is just sugar factory alone, you'd be amazed at what can be achieved. Then you have to ask yourself, I mean, you were both old, I don't know, maybe I may not be, but at least Alero and I are. In those days, you used to have what we call local buying agents who would buy all your produce from all over Nigeria so it doesn't go to waste. And then you decided to take an IMF loan. There's nothing wrong in taking an IMF loan, but you must decide how does it affect your local, you must adapt it to your own condition. If you're not collecting fruits and vegetables, and foods are not properly organized, and the brilliant banker tells you, you have to can it, industrialization. Do you eat canned corn? Can you have corn on cob? Can you have onions? Those are basic issues. So I think if they are serious about serving the people who have elected them, and Alero and Ayo, with all the analysis they are doing, will do a much, much better job than most of them in trying to do with this. I'm not trying to run down government, because if they didn't keep government, there won't be a government, will be Sudan today. So they've done some good job. But what I'm saying is that we're so far sub-optimizing that the world looks at us and wonders what the hell is going on. That's my problem. So, and I've told you basically, we are the country best equipped and most best positioned to achieve net zero in less than 10 years. If they want a document, we can put it together for them. If they want to know how to structure their financing, they are very brilliant Nigerians who can do it. But they don't need to use a Nigerian. You can have a central bank government that's not Nigerian. England just showed you one. They brought them from Canada. So why you keep talking about it must be North, East, South, Christian, Muslim, woman, man? Those are the issues. We're just dancing around in circles. I'm sorry I'm not being very helpful. Thank you.
Of course, you are being as helpful as can be, and it's quite admirable. I think the challenge is quite clear and obvious. If the country is going to achieve its set objectives, especially concerning this energy transition plan, what you both gentlemen are saying is to begin by considering the people in all of it. But I guess that over time, we will definitely hear more and more from government, how this plan is going to be executed and what role the Office of the Citizen of the Federal Republic of Nigeria will play on that, going from what we began with earlier. But Mr. Wakwe, let me come back to you. You have heard the figures. $410 billion over the next 40 years or less, or 40 years, before we can achieve net zero emission of clean energy This translates, according to the Office of the Vice President, to about $10 billion per year. First of all, what's your take on that? There are so many questions around that, but what's your take on that billing? I'm almost certain that the federal government is going to need the collaboration of states, of local governments, and all of that. In terms of the figures, help us understand, if you will, what the monies might be going into. I mean, you haven't seen the plan, so what do you think this $10 billion annual spending on energy transition will go into?
Well, like I said, I will need to take a closer look at the plan beyond the newspaper review. So I think if you ask me, the money should go into one, power generation. We need to go from 12,000 megawatts that we are today. Nigeria will need something like 50,000 megawatts. So we need to do that. We need to invest in the transmission infrastructure. That's a major bottleneck. We need to expand the distribution and strengthen it. So in the power, electricity space, you're going to have to spend a lot of money. I actually doubt that if we did it right, that 410 would be enough, right? But so you're going to do all that. In the transportation space, you need to invest in production of cleaner fuels, whether it's CNG or LPG. And basically, there has to be a conversion of your transportation fleet over time. That is a major spend area. You need to look at, of course, we talk about the households, domestic cooking. We have to start looking at reticulation of gas to homes, right? Especially in the urban centers. That should happen. That's something that I don't know why we're still building. Abuja still does not have gas to homes today. So we're thinking, oh, okay, when the AKK gets in there, there'll be a gateway, a point in Abuja where you should be able to take gas. And I hope that we can, a city like Abuja that is planned at least, we should be able to get gas to homes, right? So there's a lot to be done, whether in the transportation, household cooking, the oil and gas, maybe less spent there, because really what we need to do is actually flare out. That should be the primary, because we are not consuming the crude we produce here. So I think the bulk of our focus should be on how do we ensure zero flares going forward. That's already something that's in the works, and I'm glad that it's going to be private sector driven. So, and I need to make that point about being private sector driven. My brother here had talked about the lack of capacity of government to execute the most simplest of plans. It is a fact. Okay, so what we need to do, I think, is whatever plan they have needs to be anchored and driven by the private sector. That would be my personal view, and it's based on history. So I think that we should see less government. Government can help facilitate raising of capital, providing the right operating environment, and all of that. They should limit their role to doing just that. I don't expect that government will start building power plants or getting into all of this. No. I think that whatever plan we have should be driven primarily by the private sector.
But on that private sector part, let me ask Mr. Iyore. One of the targets, one of the 5 categories is industry. And of course, most industries are private sector powered. To cut down, there's a target for zero emission of fossil fuels, or transition from fossil fuels to cleaner energy within industries in the country. Again, I speak to buy-in. Most corporations today, most industries today, they power their generators, they literally produce their own energy by themselves. That transition, well, the federal government says it's going to take about 40 years or thereabout, but how do you see the progression going on? What are the first steps you would recommend, especially for the private sector in this matter? I mean, talking about the industry bit.
Thank you very much, Ayo. There's something that's happened already to lead the private sector. It is called the commercialization of NNPC. What that means basically is that the resource that we have that the world is looking at that can guarantee money coming into this country is our energy hydrocarbon assets. And so what I will have seen, what I will have expected to see is not the vice president going around on a roadshow. Is the MD of NNPC doing a roadshow saying that I'm no longer straitjacketed and that the governance issues are gone. And these are my strategies to build gas, LNG plants, trains to the world over the next time, but that this is what we'll do locally. And Ghana did that when Ashanti Goldfield was more or less privatized. And Sam Jonah, backed by Barclays Resort, which I was part of, did a roadshow to explain to the world that Ghana was no longer going to run its gold reserves through state control. We have a wonderful position now. We say, look, we now have to commercialize an NPC. Is the world aware of it? We're not even talking about raising capital yet. How many family offices can take position for it? And this same time where we are going that way, we are going along with the world, because with what's happening in Russia, the world requires gas, more LNG trains. America wants to do the same thing, but America is such a long distance from Europe. Nigeria is naturally the country that should do it. The MD of NNPC has not done a roadshow. He has not met the international banks. But at his level, he should not even be talking about meeting international banks. He should be meeting the family offices in the Saudi, Southeast, and everywhere. But he should come with a clear plan of how he intends to execute it. And then, as for governance, rather than leaving the money in the cat and mouse game between the Treasury and Central Bank, the assets, when they are created, should go to back up the burgeoning pension assets, so that these pension assets that are losing value will begin to gain value. It's not rocket science. It's so basic that at times I wonder what's going on. I hope what I've said is not cryptic. 1, Europe needs gas. 2, we have more gas than we're doing. 5, we are running the LNG very well successfully. 3, you can't steal LNG on the road. 4, when the money comes, instead of giving it to central bank to sell, you can use them to show up the asset base of the pension fund, so that this pension money you are collecting does become zero very quickly. So I don't know how much you can do in a program like this. I wish they would call Alero and Ayo and ask them a few questions, and then maybe Alero can then decide, okay, one Uwakwe is there, one other person is there, can you talk to these people? Because we are not looking for jobs. It's so simple. We're in #1 position in the world. Everything is with us. It's just for us to put them together. #1, if you followed LNG now, we'll be a world power in 10 years. World power in 10 years. I mean, you and I don't know if you read a book called Burmese Days. Burmese Days is a book published by George Orwell. It was his first book before he wrote the other ones, but they push it down. They don't let you see it. It shows about what colonialism does to the minds of people. Africa, Nigeria in particular, in the villages, we're still slapping mud on frames of bamboo to build houses. Come on. We got independence in 60 years. They don't need your money. Just guide them properly. What's the standard size of a brick? How does it be that it doesn't break when you mold it? How do you do those things? Do you supervise schools, primary schools, to ensure that they do those things? You know what's called a bar mitzvah, where you read the Quran and learn it, what do you call it, Torah, when you're 11. It helps your memory. What do our children do? We used to do them in those days, timetable and the rest of them were very, very disorderly. So those are the issues, and I don't think it's rocket science. We are positioned to be a world power in 10 years. If Valero and Ayo can become president tomorrow, but they won't let it. Those are the issues. When you refuse to analyze, you can't achieve anything. So I'm sorry.
Mr. Wakwe, the plan says that gas will play a critical role as a transition fuel in Nigeria's net zero pathway. But we do have a challenge regarding gas in this country, haven't we? Let's look at that, the issue of gas in this plan, the place of gas in this plan.
Okay, so the world is coming around to the idea that gas will be a very viable transition fuel. I think it's a year ago, it wasn't quite obvious to most that that's what needs to happen. So I think we are getting to the point where everybody agrees that even if gas is not very clean as we want it, it's not as clean as the renewables, but it's still a bridge fuel between the very dirty fuels, the crude and diesel and all that, and of course the renewables. So it's a bridge. That's why it's called the transition fuel. I think that, like my brother said, we talk about the LLNG, for instance. I think that we're doing Train 7 now, which is a good thing, but I wish it happened a lot earlier. So you can always think about, we're doing about 22,000 metric tons per annum today. What are the challenges there? From what I understand, we are not able to fill the existing capacity in that plant today. So we are running much lower, 60, 70% of the plant capacity, at a point when we are supposed to be supplying Europe with so we should, that plant, we should have invested, and this is something that we keep talking about. There has been an underinvestment in the sector in the last 10, 15 years, and it's showing. The result of that underinvestment is showing today. So if we had done what we needed to have done 10 years ago, we should fill the 6 trains that we have in LNG today and supply the gas and make good money. But here we are, we have 6 trains, we're not filling it with gas, we're doing maybe 60, 70% of the capacity of the plant, and we're building Train 7, which will take a while before it comes. So we're not able to fill in that gap immediately. So we're not nimble enough. So again, those are issues. So there are challenges with that. But if you talk about the role of gas in the entire transition, I think I already highlighted some of this. We need to use our gas beyond exporting gas, which is a no-brainer. How do we drive our economy? By utilizing our gas. So those are the issues. So we need LPG. Today we import LPG. So we import the derivatives of gas as well. So how do we get a thriving petrochemical industry, for instance? Why should we? If you look at the numbers, where our domestic consumption is about between 1.2 to 1.4 BCF a day, we produce 8. So the bulk of it is exported, and our economy is not gas driven. So what can we do to re-energize our economy using gas? So those are very critical. How do we produce enough LPG that we don't import and lose the scarce forest that we have? That's an important issue.
But don't also forget that we have a natural gas expansion plan, Mr. Nwakwe. I'm very sure that's not something strange to you. It's not that government hasn't thought about this thing. I know that, for instance, there is an energy, energy plan of sorts that dates back 2014, and I'm almost certain that that plan didn't start at that time. The thinking must have gone on for a while. Energy, we've said over and over again, gas has always been central in the thinking of government, various government at all levels over the years. What then is the challenge? Why do we talk about a gas expansion plan and people don't seem to get it or see it happen?
Yeah, and we did say at the beginning of the program that we have an implementation problem. So there is a national gas expansion plan. Have you seen it? I haven't seen any document that articulates what government intends to do and who will do it. If one exists, I should know, but I haven't seen anything. So what I'm saying is, we know what needs to be done. We need to drive our economy. In fact, several years ago, if you remember, when we did the economic plan that got us out of recession, that plan says that we needed to focus on gas-based reindustrialization of the country. It was something that everybody agreed we needed to do. So the point is, who has done what? I don't know that we are reindustrializing using gas. How much more have we achieved in the utilization? Yeah, we've grown LPG consumption somewhat, but we could do more.
Okay. Well, Mr. Ayora, just a second. We're running out of time. We have to close this segment now. So, Mr. Ayora, what would be your final words on this? If you could sit the federal government down or somehow give some counsel, what should be our first steps that will help us sustain the conversation?
Thank you very much. You know, as journalists and the fourth estate of the realm, you are actually in the office of the citizen. You speak on our behalf. You know that. That's your job. So, Larry's laughing. So, what I am saying right now is that if we really intend to go forward, every time you call somebody a lawyer, an accountant, an engineer, they are called chartered professions. In other words, the government gives you that license to do that job specifically. No one else can do it, stockbroker and the rest of them. Now, when you give somebody a charter and the guy goes ahead to abuse the trust placed in the person, what do you think should be done? So how now do you say you are running a system? And the accountant general, I don't know if it's true, confirm it, and the accountant general of the system, because of the TSA system, have been able to put away 0.109 billion. And the one from a smaller state has taken 438 billion. It therefore means, from what I said earlier on, that if you are having a bath with a water that is not clean, you can never be clean. And that water that we're talking about is called the liquidity in the economy. If we cannot manage our currency, I'm sorry, we cannot manage our currency, my brother, we're hiding to nothing. I'm sorry to say. That's hard. If they want to deal with the currency, and we've been saying this since 1988, it can be done in less than 6 months. In less than 6 months. You don't have to use Nigerians, but there are Nigerians that can do it. Because what you're doing now basically is that your currency is losing its attributes. It's becoming water that is polluted. And I remember that the young man who head of NESG, Aswe Gudalu, said something and they nearly chopped his head off. We can't be in a country where people cannot speak. Thank you.
Mr. Charles Iyore, Principal Partner, Dion and Associates, who joined us virtually from Kent, as well as Mr. Joe Wakwe, Oil and Gas Consultant, who also joined us virtually from Lagos. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming to shed more light on this energy transition plan for us this morning and explaining it to us in rather clear terms. Sunrise will be back very shortly. Do stay with us.